I began my career in law enforcement over 25 years ago. In that time, I have had countless paranormal encounters. I'm going to share a couple with you today. Things that are not natural, things that are 110% supernatural. About 18 years ago, I was at work. This police station where I worked at the time, a very old two-story building. It looked like a house. It was built in the early 1920s. From the day we moved in and until the last day we were there, we had countless paranormal encounters. Most of the time it was simple things like disembodied voices, phantom footsteps, things running up and down the stairs. But the story I'm going to tell you is one that had multiple witnesses. Not just the officers from my department, but a sheriff's deputy from the county in which I work. This was a warm, beautiful, quintessential summer night in the heart of Appalachia. Slow night, not much was going on. We were out on the porch of this department where I worked, just hanging out. It had a huge front porch, and there was like 4 or 5 officers that worked with me who were there. And this sheriff's deputy, a good friend of ours, he would often come over and sit around if it was a slow night. So as we're just sitting on this porch, we start talking about ghost stories. We start telling personal experiences, things we've encountered or witnessed in the police station we're at. And it led into other stories. And I remember this sheriff's deputy was supposed to get off work at like midnight. And we went outside probably around 11 p.m. Before we knew it, it was almost 5 a.m. We had sat there all night talking about ghosts and paranormal, demons, and all things spooky that go bump in the night. Then, off in the distance, and this is a very rural area, okay, there wasn't anyone out really at this time of the morning, which now again was around 5 a.m. You have about 6 grown men sitting on this porch telling ghost stories. And as we look down the private road that's coming up by our department, we see what looks like a little old lady. Like what you would think the little church lady. A little small, frail, gray hair, glasses, tiny lady. She was carrying a loaf of bread. That's the only thing she had. Now, after hours of ghost stories and spooky tales, your mind's already thinking that way. Anyway, you're thinking, what is this or who is this? And we didn't know if she was going to pass on by or stop. But she slowly made her way up to the porch where we were sitting. She got off the roadway and came up the sidewalk to where we were at. And we were all just kind of looking at each other, not knowing what to expect. We honestly, once we realized she wasn't a ghost, or we thought we knew she wasn't a ghost, we, was thinking maybe she was lost because it was, again, in the wee hours of the morning. She was by herself. She had no business being out. But as she proceeded up to the porch, she began to speak. She was very kind. She didn't seem to be rattled or like confused. There was a church about 1/10 of a mile or less, probably less, right up above where we were at, just up the road a little ways. And she said she was needing to go to the church. She was with a mission group, a church who came in and done mission work. And she needed to go up to this old church. It wasn't really used anymore as a church. It was just kind of, they kept a lot of supplies for missionaries and things like that. She wanted to know if one of the officers, would escort her up there since it was still dark outside. She was a little creeped out. She wanted to know if one of us would go with her just to make sure no one was in the building, which obviously we all agreed and volunteered to go. But the sheriff's deputy, who had long time been off work at this point, decided that he would go and he would just leave and go home from there. He would take her up there, do a walk through the building, make sure it was clear, then he would just go on home. We all agreed and went our separate ways. He left with this little lady and he walked up to the church because, again, it was a very short distance. And so we go back inside of our department and we just were sitting around drinking coffee. And probably 20 minutes or so go by, we had forgotten about it. We hear someone on the porch. And we look as the door opened, and it is the sheriff's deputy. And he kind of has this pale color to him now, and he's very frightened or startled. And he asked, did we see that little old lady? Did she come back down to our office? And we said, no, she left with you. We assumed that you took her up to the church. And he said he did. And that's when the story gets really interesting. In his words, they walk up to the church. Again, this is an old church, probably 60, 70 years old at least. The lights are off, and they enter through the kitchen, if I'm not mistaken. They're flipping on lights and just talking. She's very polite and friendly. And she begins to talk about, it's kind of creepy and whatnot. So he said he would clear the whole building. He would go down in the basement, through the chapel, and make sure it was clear. But she stayed up in the kitchen area and around the chapel and began doing whatever it was she was there to do. He made his way down into the basement. He searched all the corners around the boxes and the little closets, and no one was there like he expected. So he made his way back upstairs, expecting to see her in the kitchen or maybe in the chapel at this point. But he proceeded to do a sweep of this whole building, this whole church, every room, around every door, every closet, even back down to the basement, and she was nowhere to be found. And that is when he knew what was really going on. He was pale at this point. And he came back down after he had searched the building, because his initial thought was maybe she got in here and fell, or she's hurt, or maybe she stepped outside. He done a search of this whole building, inside and out. She was not there. One more quick story. This department that I just talked about in the previous story. Paranormal activity was very high when we first moved in. This place sat vacant for several years, 2 or 3 years. When we first moved in, things amplified. Alright, we wasn't there long at all before we knew this place is haunted. And after a couple months or so, it kind of settled down. You would just occasionally experience something, the phantom footsteps, disembodied voices, or something would fly off the shelf. We were in this building probably 8 or 9 years. I think we moved out of that building in 2013. But as we were moving our stuff out of this office, we actually moved into a smaller building just next door. It took us probably a week or probably 2 weeks to get everything moved. But as we began the moving process, similar to that of when we moved in the building, paranormal activity started amping up again. It got spooky. It got uncomfortable. So my office was upstairs. It was a huge 2-story home. It was originally a home, again built in the 1920s. It had served many purposes over the decades. The upstairs, again, the chief that time had an office. I was the assistant chief. I had an office. I had a futon in my office, and some nights if I worked late, this was before I had children, so my wife and I, if it was late, sometimes I would just sleep over and let her know where I was at. We had a shower, everything I needed. It was starting to get uncomfortable. We'd start to experience the activity. And the upstairs was super creepy. Not a lot of stuff happened, but when it did, it was more prominent. Like, you noticed it. It wanted you to know it was there. This whole night, I'm up there, I'm working on my computer, doing some paperwork. Nothing really happened. Just kind of an uneasiness. It got up after midnight. It was getting late. I was getting tired. I didn't feel like driving home. I had to be at work early the next morning anyway. So I just decided I would sleep on the futon. As I got changed out of my uniform, I had some ball shorts and a t-shirt in my office. Just as I was getting into bed, I heard something very loud. Just on the other side of the wall of where my head would be, there was a huge thud and then something, it almost sounded like footsteps going down these old creaky wooden steps. There was another officer downstairs who was actually on duty. He was catching up on some paperwork. I texted him because I knew what it was. He was just at the bottom of the steps, the next room over. I could hear him get up because he obviously heard whatever it was also. So I waited about 30 seconds and I sent him a text and said, "What was that?" But I already knew. When we first moved into this building in 2004, I believe, Chief, who had moved, he changed houses, and he had some stuff that was stored in one of the closets upstairs. It was a big closet. We had a lot of room. He had a wooden picture of the Last Supper, the one of Jesus surrounded by his disciples. It was on like a piece of cut wood, like from a sawmill. It was beautiful. He didn't want it, so we took it and just hung it up on the wall at the top of those steps. And it had been there for nearly 10 years. It had never fell. It had never fallen off the wall. And we were pretty loud. You know, we hit the wall often and running into things, people up and down the stairs every day. It had never fallen off the wall. But that night, when I heard that thud and the tumbling down the steps, I knew exactly what it was. So when I texted my coworker, I said, "What was that?" He said that was the picture of Jesus at the Last Supper. And that might not sound that creepy, but as I tell this story 11, 12 years later, chills literally just went down my back. Because this thing, I don't know what it was. When we moved in, it didn't like it. But when we moved out, it liked it even less. I don't know if it got used to us or what happened. But that picture had hung in that same spot for the better part of 10 years and had never fallen off the wall. And this was along with a lot of other stuff that had happened. The things flying off the shelf, you could hear doors slam, voices. It was angry, and we knew it. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please do so now. Turn on all notifications so you know when I post. I post shorts pretty much every day, long form videos once or twice a week, and I'm going to have some really cool investigations coming soon. Thank you guys so much. And you can also follow me over on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Have a great day. God bless. I'll see you soon.